There was a drawer in the bedroom that Renee Calloway had not opened in 11 years. It sat in the bottom right of an oak roll-top desk her husband's father had carried up from a house that no longer existed, and every other drawer in it slid open, but that one had a small brass lock, and the key lived somewhere she had stopped looking for a long time ago. You could buy the whole desk at an estate sale for $90. Renee did not know what the lock was guarding. The old woman in the Sunday coat did. In 48 hours, she was going to put a key into that brass lock and turn it, and pull a lost house back across 40 years. And Renee, who that cold Tuesday in March had started packing a suitcase without crying, which frightened her more than tears would have, did not know any of it yet. She had learned a long time ago how to do hard things without making a sound. Renee got up at 4:50 every morning, 6 days a week, and on the 7th she still woke at 4:50 and lay there until the alarm she didn't need went off at 6:15. Her body kept the schedule even when her job didn't. She was a hospice aide, which meant she went into the homes of people who were dying and made the dying easier. And you did not do that work for 11 years without your body learning when to wake. She made $16.40 an hour. After almost 12 years with the same agency, she had been bumped twice 40 cents the first time and 35 the second, and she remembered both raises the way some women remembered anniversaries. The bus from West End down to the agency lot cost her $1.25 each way. $2.50 a day, $15 a week, and there were 3 or 4 weeks out of every month where she walked the 38 minutes instead, and folded the $15 into a coffee can on the second shelf above the stove. She had a whole system of cans and envelopes that nobody but God and her grandmother's ghost knew about. The light bill envelope, which she fed $40 to on the 1st and the 15th. The church envelope, which was thin but never empty, never once empty in 11 years, not even the winter, the heat pump went out. And the one she didn't label because labeling it would have made it real, the one that held what she was going to need if she ever decided she could not stay in that house another month. There was $317 in the unlabeled envelope. She had been adding to it, $3 and $5 at a time, for about 14 months. Her first patient that March was a man named Mr. Pruitt, 81, lung cancer, in a back bedroom on Fayetteville Street, with a window that looked out on a yard gone to seed and a chain-link fence with the gate hanging off one hinge. His daughter lived 2 hours west in Charlotte and called on Sundays at 7. His son did not call. Renee turned Mr. Pruitt every 2 hours so the bed sores wouldn't open, and she did the arithmetic on his morphine without being asked, 5 milligrams every 4 hours and a little more on the bad afternoons, and she sat with him in the long gray stretch between 2 and 4 o'clock when the light went flat and nobody else came. On a Wednesday near the middle of the month, she sat with Mr. Pruitt for 50 minutes past the end of her shift. She wasn't being paid for the 50 minutes. The agency rounded to the quarter hour, and her ride wasn't coming until 4:30 anyway, but that was not why she stayed. She stayed because his breath had changed. The spacing of it, 11 seconds, then 14, then a long frightening 20, and she had heard that arithmetic in enough rooms over 11 years to know what it counted down to, and she did not believe a man should make that particular change alone. She sang to him low, an old hymn her grandmother used to hum over the stove, the one about wading in the troubled water, and she did not get all the words right, and it did not matter. When his daughter called that night, Renee told her gently to come in the morning if she could, on the first flight or the early road, and she did not say why, and the daughter understood anyway and was there by 9. Renee never told the agency she had stayed the 50 minutes. She never told anyone. There was no line on the timesheet for it, and she would not have written it down if there had been. Her grandmother used to say, "You don't get paid for the part that counts. The part that counts is the part nobody sees." Her grandmother had come up from Georgia in 1946, one of more than 6 million who left the red clay over those decades for the mills and the warehouses and whatever the cities up the line would. give a black woman with strong hands and a fourth-grade education. She had raised Renee's father, Otis, in a shotgun house in a part of Durham that the city decided, somewhere in an office Renee never saw, somewhere around 1965, was in the way of progress. By the time Renee was old enough to understand it, more than half of where her people had lived and worked and buried each other was gone under the 4 lanes of a freeway. You could stand on certain corners in the old Aide, and the old folks would point with a whole hand and say, "That's where the Biltmore Hotel stood. That's where the Regal had its movie house. That's where Dr. Moore kept his office," and there would be nothing there but the long, cool shadow of the overpass and the sound of cars going somewhere else as fast as they could. Her father kept a house anyway. Otis Greer was a careful man, a brick mason by trade, the kind who measured a thing 4 times and cut it once, and then measured the cut. In 1971 he bought a little frame house on Kent Street, 1107 Kent, with a porch he rebuilt himself board by board, square and true, and he used to sit Renee on the top step in the long summer evening 9s, when she was 7 and 8 and 9, and tell her the same thing every time, the way you tell a child a thing you need them to keep. "A home is the one thing they can't garnish off your name, baby. Land don't lie. People lie. Banks lie. Land just sits there and waits for you." He believed it the way some men believe scripture. And he lost the house anyway, and that was the wound Renee carried into her marriage and never fully set down. Otis lost it because he co-signed. A cousin of his, a man everybody called Junior, though he was past 50, had a scheme, the way Junior always had a scheme, and this one needed Otis's good name on a piece of paper for $38,000. And Otis put his name on it because that is what you did for family. Because the South they had come up from had taught them you hold on to each other or you do not hold on at all. Junior defaulted in the 11th month. The lender came for whoever's name was on the line, and Otis's name was right there on the line, and the careful man who measured everything 4 times lost the house he had measured most carefully of all. He moved into a rented room off Pettigrew Street for $90 a week, and he got quiet, and the quiet was worse than any anger would have been. And 3 years after that, at 66, he died, and Renee was never sure to the end of her life that the losing and the dying weren't the same thing wearing 2 different coats. So Renee learned, young and all the way down in the bone, what money was. Money was the thing that made good men go quiet. Money was the flood that took the house. You did not trust it, and you did not let it out of your sight. And most of all, you did not let a man you loved get between you and the truth of where it was going. Because she had watched the not knowing kill her father slower than any cancer she had ever nursed, which is exactly why the locked drawer mattered so much, and why, after 11 years of walking past it twice a day, she had finally started to read it the way you read a closed door in your own house when you've begun to be afraid of what's behind it. She had started to wonder what kind of man keeps a locked drawer from his own wife for 11 years. And every answer she could come up with had gotten worse than the one before it. Theodore Calloway was 55 and had hands that would never come fully clean again, the creases of his knuckles permanently dark with 31 years of other men's engines. He ran a 2-bay garage off Driver Street, now Calloway and Son, though there was no son, but for the first 9 years of their marriage he had driven long haul, 2 and 3 weeks at a stretch. Durham to Laredo, Durham to Bakersfield, 2,100 miles one way, with his voice coming to her at midnight from a truck stop in a state she had never seen and never would. He was not a talker. He had never been a talker. When they were courting back when she was 40 and he was 43, she had mistaken his quiet for depth, and she was not entirely wrong about that. But she had not understood yet that a quiet can be a depth a person drowns in. Theo came up harder than Renee. If you could rank such things, which the old mothers at Mount Zion would tell you flat out that you could not. His father, Walter Calloway, had owned a little house in Haiti before Haiti was a word. People said the way they said a funeral. Walter had a trade, he did upholstery, and a good black upholsterer in Durham in those years was never out of work. He reupholstered the seats of half the cars on his block, and the pews of 2 churches, and a barber's 3 chairs over on Pettigrew. And he had bought his house in 1958 with a loan that a white man at a downtown desk had explained to him in a way that was true in every single one of its parts and a lie in the whole of it. It was what they would come to call a balloon loan. The payments were small and friendly for the first 5 years, $44 a month, small enough that a man with a trade and a wife and a 9-year-old boy could make them easy and still put a ham on the table on the first Sunday of the month. And then, on a date written into the contract in language Walter could read every word of, but had not once been helped to understand, the whole remaining principal came due at one time, a number with more zeros in it than Walter Calloway had ever held in his 2 hands, due in full, due now, and there was no bank in that city in 1963 that would refinance a black upholsterer in Haiti. And so the house went the way the whole neighborhood was already being told, in offices nobody invited them to, that it was going to go. Theo was 9 years old. He remembered the day the second letter came, the one with the date circled. He remembered his father sitting at the oak roll-top desk, this same oak roll-top desk, with the letter open flat in front of him under the lamp, and not moving. Walter Calloway sat at that desk for what Theo would remember the rest of his life as the entire afternoon, 3 hours. 4. The bar of light from the window moving across the floorboards from the rug to the doorway, and he did not put his head down, and he did not raise his voice, and he did not say a single word. And that stillness went into the 9-year-old boy like a roofing nail, driven all the way to the head. Before Walter died of a stroke at 61 with his house 12 years gone, he told his son a thing, and he told it to him more than once, the way a man tells you the one thing he most needs you to carry after him. He said, "A man keeps one drawer his wife can't open, not to lie to her. To have one thing left when everything else gets taken away, that drawer is the wall that keeps the roof up. You hear me, son? Whatever else you do in this life, you keep your drawer." Theo heard him. Theo kept his drawer for 11 years, and he had been so sure, so completely and quietly sure, that he was building a wall to hold a roof up over the woman he loved, that he never once let himself see that the woman under that roof had started, somewhere in the last year, to count the days until she could finally walk out from under it. Miss Sodes saw it, though. Odessa Calloway was 78 and had missed exactly nothing in any of those years. She had buried Walter in 1989 and raised Theo by herself on a cafeteria cook's wages and outlived almost everybody who would have dared argue with her, and she had a particular way of looking at her grown son across her own kitchen table that could make a 55-year-old man feel 9 again. But she knew her boy was carrying something heavy with both hands, the way you carry a thing you're afraid of dropping, and she knew her daughter-in-law had been getting thinner around the eyes, the way a woman gets when she has begun to leave a suitcase. And Odessa Calloway had seen too much in 78 years to believe for 1 minute that those two things had nothing to do with each other. The roof started it. The literal roof over the back bedroom, where a brown stain had been spreading across the ceiling for a month like something alive and slow. Then in the 3rd week of March, the rain got up under the shingles and into the wall, and at 2 in the morning the plaster came down in a wet gray sheet across the foot of their bed, and they stood there in the dark and dazed up at the ruined ceiling rapid showing through. Renee said, the thing she had been afraid to say for a month. "We have to fix that. That's a real roof job, Theo. That's $3,000–4,000. "I'll handle it," he said. "With what money?" I said I'll handle it. And there it was, the same 3 words she had been hearing for 11 years, "I'll handle it," said in the same flat closed tone he used to shut a door. And something in Renee that had been bending for a very long time did not snap so much as it simply, finally, quietly stopped bending. She did not argue. She had learned from her father that arguing with a man about money was how you found out exactly who you had married, and she was suddenly more afraid of finding out than she was of the hole in the roof. 2 days later, on the Friday, she found the envelope. It had slipped down behind the wide, shallow drawer, the one that opened, and it had been working its way loose for weeks, maybe months. She was on her knees looking for the warranty on the water heater, and instead her fingers found the corner of a stiff envelope wedged in the back, and she pulled out a letter from a company called Sentinel Holdings, LLC, with nothing but a Durham P.O. box for an address. And inside was a single sheet, a payment record, and on it was a column of dates, marching back and back and back, 11 years of dates, and beside each date the same number paid on or about the first of every month. $312. $312. More than 120 of them down 2 pages, to a company she had never in her life heard the name of, for a reason she could not begin to imagine. She sat down on the edge of the bed with the sheet in her hand, and she did the arithmetic the way she did everything. Slow and 4 times over. $312 a month was $3,744 a year. Times 11 years was over $41,000. $41,000 that had left their house, their account, her marriage, going out the door in $312 pieces every single month for 11 years, going somewhere, going to someone, while she walked the bus money to work in a coffee can and lay awake doing the math on the light bill and put with $3 at a time into an envelope she could not bring herself to label. There are a great many things a woman can imagine 41,000 secret dollars going toward. And Renee, sitting on the edge of the bed in the gray Friday light, with the rain still dripping through the back room, imagined most of them in the space of about 4 minutes. The kindest version she could build was a gambling debt, a bookie, a weakness he was ashamed of. The version her dead father whispered to her was the one with another woman in it, another house across town, maybe another child, an entire second family paid for in $312 increments out of the silence she had spent 11 years mistaking for depth. She put the sheet back exactly where she had found it, wedged in the same place at the same angle. She was proud of that later and for the rest of her life that she put it back. She did not confront him at supper. She did not scream. She did not pour his coffee on the kitchen floor. What she did was go and stand in front of the oak roll-top desk, in front of the locked bottom right drawer, and put her hand flat against the wood over the brass lock. And she stood there. She counted it without meaning to, the way you count a held breath. At 40 seconds she understood, all the way down, that whatever was behind that lock, she did not want to become the kind of woman who pried it open with a screwdriver in the dark. Otis Greer had raised a daughter who did not take what was not given her, not even the truth, not even when she had bought and paid for it with 11 years of her one life. She took her hand off the wood. She would not open the drawer. She would just go. That afternoon she called her mother-in-law, because you did not leave a marriage in that family without telling Miss Odessa. It would have been like trying to leave without telling God. "Mama," Renee said, and her own voice came out so level it scared her worse than the envelope had. "I'm going to go on down to my sister's in Rocky Mount for a while. Maybe a good while. I just didn't want you to hear it from anybody but me." There was a long silence on the line. Renee had braced herself for questions. Odessa did not ask one. What Odessa said, after the silence had run its full course, was, "You leaving today, baby? Or you leaving Saturday?" "Saturday." "All right," Odessa said. "All right then." And she hung up, and Renee stood in the kitchen holding the phone against her chest, not understanding that she had just set something heavy in motion, that the level calm in her own voice had told the old woman more than an hour of weeping could have, because Odessa Calloway had buried a husband who went quiet and watched him go quiet for years before the box. And she knew down to the ground exactly what it sounded like when a person had stopped fighting for a thing and started instead, getting ready to lose it for good. They lived 3 steps and 11 years apart in that small house over those last days. Theo did not know she had found the Sentinel letter. He did not know about the suitcase she was filling a few things at a time, a sweater here, a pair of shoes there, the way she did everything, so the closet would not look emptied all at once and tip him off before Saturday. He went to the garage at 7 and came home at 6:10, and he was, if anything, gentler than usual that week, quieter and more careful, which she now read as guilt, because that is how you read every single thing about a person once you have decided which story you are standing in the middle of. What Theo knew was that he was close. He had 3 payments left. After 11 years and 129 payments of $312, made early every single month, never one of them late, never one short by $1. The contract for deed on the house at 1107 Kent Street, Otis Greer's house, this house with the porch. Otis had built square and true with his own mason's hands and then lost to a cousin's bad paper, would be paid in full. The deed would convey, and the name typed on it, the name in the grantee line, would be Renee's. That had been the whole point from the first month. The first month after they were married, when he finally got the entire story of her father out of her in a parked truck at a rest stop on I-85, Theo had decided. He could not give her back her father. He could not unbuild a freeway or unsign a cousin's loan, or take 11 years of quiet back out of a dead man. But he could find the house, and the house, when he went looking, had passed through the hands of a slumlord, and then a flipper, and then a company called Sentinel Holdings, LLC, that bought up cheap black-built houses all over the old neighborhoods for $20,000, $30,000 cash, and sold them right back to people who looked like the people who built them, on contract for deed, the modern cousin of his own father's balloon loan. The exact same trap with a fresh set of teeth, where you paid like an owner for years, fixed the furnace like an owner, patched the porch like an owner, and you owned nothing, not one board until the very last payment cleared, and one missed month in year 10 could put you out on the curb with no equity and no house and nothing at all to show for a decade of $312. Theo knew the trap. His own father had died inside a version of it, and he had walked straight into it on purpose, with his eyes wide open, because it was the only way on God's earth a mechanic could ever buy that particular house. And he had made every payment 4 days early for 11 years, because he knew that a company like Sentinel sat there month after month, half praying for him to slip up so they could keep the house and the $41,000 both. He had never told Renee. Because of the wall. Because of his father sitting at the desk that whole long afternoon. Because a man keeps one drawer his wife can't open. But underneath the wall, deeper down than the motto his father left him, was a thing Theo Calloway could not have said out loud if you had held a torque wrench to his head. He was afraid. He was afraid that if he told her, "We are buying back your daddy's house," and then Sentinel found some clause in 8-point type, or the flood came the way the flood always seemed to come for their people, and he lost it the way Walter lost his, and Otis lost his, then he would have broken Renee not once but twice. Once when she was a girl and her careful father died quiet in a rented room, and again, far worse, with her own hope used against her as the lever. He had decided, somewhere in the first year, that he would rather she believe him a cold and distant man for 11 years than risk breaking her in half with a promise the world might not let him keep. So he kept his drawer. He dusted the old desk every Sunday afternoon the way another man tends a grave. And inside the locked bottom right drawer was the payment book, soft covered and worn at the corners from his thumb, and the contract, and the most recent letter from Sentinel confirming that upon receipt of the 3 remaining payments, $936 in all, the property at 1107 Kent Street would convey to the grantee free and clear of all encumbrance. And one more thing. A single sheet of lined paper on which Theo had written, in pencil, in the blocky, careful hand of an upholsterer's son, the only sentence he had ever let himself write about any of it in 11 years. For R. Otis's porch. He was going to wait until the final payment cleared in June. He was going to drive her over to Kent Street some ordinary evening and walk her up the porch her father built and put the key in her hand and watch her face come apart. He had been carrying that one picture in his mind for 11 years, the way a man carries a live coal in his cupped hands, hunched around it, protecting it from every wind. He wanted it perfect. He came within 3 payments and 1 suitcase of losing all of it. Theo went over to his mother's house on the Thursday night, the night before Odessa came. He did not fully know why he went. The garage had been slow, 2 oil changes, and a brake job by 4. And the house had felt wrong all week. Renee moving through the rooms like a woman sitting in a waiting room for test results. And he found himself at Odessa's kitchen table, the same way he found himself there, his whole life, whenever a thing was sitting too heavy on his chest to carry home. Odessa put the kettle on. She did not make coffee. Coffee was for ordinary talking, and tea was for letting a man find his own slow way down to the thing. And she had known this particular man for 55 years. He turned the cup in his 2 dark hands for a while. Then he said it the way the men in that family said the hardest things, sideways and down to the table instead of up to the face. "Renee thinks I'm cold," he said. "She's thought it a long time now. I can see it on her." Odessa said nothing. "I'm 3 payments out, Mama." He looked up at her then. 3. After 11 years, the Greer house, 1107 Kent. It's hers in June, free and clear, deed and everything. I've been paying that company $312 every month since the year we married. 129 payments. I never missed one. Not once. You hear me? Not 1 single month in 11 years. "I hear you," Odessa said. "I was going to wait till June. Take her over there. Put the key in her hand." And his voice did the thing then, a small dry catch in it, the sound of a man hearing his own 11-year plan out loud for the very first time in another person's kitchen, and beginning, just barely, to hear what had been wrong with it the whole time. "I didn't want to tell her till it was sure. Daddy lost his house. Her daddy lost his. I wasn't about to hand that woman a house and then stand there and watch somebody come take it off her. I wasn't going to break her twice." Odessa held her tea in both hands and looked a long time at her son, and she did not tell him he was a fool, and she did not tell him he was a good man, because he was both at once, and she had learned over 78 years that telling a person only one of the 2 true things about themselves is the most common way there is of lying to somebody you love. She just listened. She let him talk himself all the way down to empty. And in the talking she found out, without seeming to fish for it, that he kept the little brass key on a nail behind the John Deere calendar in his own kitchen. The free one from the parts store, second nail down, where he figured not one living soul would ever think to look for it. She filed that away the way she filed every useful thing, without so much as a flicker crossing her face. When he had run all the way out of words, she said one thing to him. She set her cup down and she said, "Your daddy kept his drawer too, Theodore. And I want you to sit right there and think real hard for me about whether keeping that drawer is the thing that saved this family, or whether it's the thing we have been paying for, every one of us, ever since." Theo did not answer her. He did not have an answer. He drove home through the dark, and the house was dark, and he believed Renee was asleep, and he did not know that on the floor of his own closet, pushed back behind his hanging coats, there was a packed suitcase waiting on Saturday. Odessa came on Friday morning, the day before Saturday, in her good Sunday coat though it was a Friday, and the sky was spitting rain. Because Odessa Calloway did not do an important thing in a house dress and never had. Renee opened the front door, and her face did the thing a face does when it is caught right in the middle of leaving. And she started to say something, anything, about how she'd told her on the phone, how she just needed a little time, how it wasn't anybody's fault. "Where your husband at?" Odessa said. It was not a question. "He's at the garage." "Mama, you didn't have to come all this way over here." But Odessa was already past her, moving with the slow, flat certainty of a woman who decided a thing the night before and slept on it and woke up still decided, through the front room and down the short hall to the bedroom, to the oak roll-top desk that had been her own dead husband's. that she had dusted in her own house for 40 years before it ever came to her son. She went to the kitchen first. Renee followed her, baffled, and watched her 78-year-old mother-in-law reach up and lift the John Deere calendar off its hook and take a small brass key off the second nail down. "Miss Odessa." Renee's voice climbed half a step. "Miss Odessa, that drawer's his. That's not ours to be opening. Whatever he's got in there, I made up my mind. I'm not going to be the one to." "I know you made up your mind," Odessa said, walking back down the hall with the key in her closed hand. "And that right there is how I know you was raised right. You'd walk clean out of an 11-year marriage before you'd take a screwdriver to a man's lock. Lord have mercy. The two of you. I have never in my life." She got down on her knees in Hospice, slow and careful, one hand flat on the wood for balance, the Sunday coat pooling around her on the floor. "But I didn't make up my mind that way, child. I'm his mother. I can open my own dead husband's drawer in my own fool son's house, and there is not a court in the whole of Durham County going to tell me one word different." She fit the little key into the brass lock and turned it. The drawer slid open with the small dry whisper of wood that has not moved in a long, long time. Odessa took out a thin, soft-covered payment book and laid it flat on the desktop. She took out a manila folder gone gray and furred at the edges and laid it down beside the book. She took out a single sheet of lined paper with 3 short lines of pencil on it and laid that down last. She did all of it slow, setting each thing down flat and square, the way you lay out the clothes a person is going to be buried in. "Come here, baby," she said, not turning around. "Come on over here and look at your cold husband been doing in the dark all these years." Renee did not want to come. Renee wanted, with the whole weight of her body, to already be on US 64 east toward Rocky Mount, where the story she had been telling herself for a week was still the only true one there was. But she came because Miss Odessa Calloway had told her to, and because some voice older than the week told her to, and she looked down at the things laid out on the desk. The payment book lay open to its first page. The first entry was dated in the spring 11 years back, the very season they were married. $312. Paid. And every single line under it, the same, $312. Paid, all the way down that page and on to the next and the next. 129 of them, everyone made on or before the first of the month, not one of them a day late in 11 years. 11 years of a man putting $312 into the dark on the first of every month and saying nothing to anybody, not even to her, especially not to her. The folder held the contract. Renee's eyes went down it the way her father had taught her to read a paper, looking for the trap, looking for the clause, and instead they snagged on an address typed plain across the top. 1107 Kent Street. She knew that address the way she knew her own name. She had been born in the front bedroom of that house. Her father had built that porch with his own hands in the summer of 1972. She had sat on the top step of it 1,000 summer evenings while a careful man told her that land doesn't lie. Her hand came up to her mouth on its own. She made herself look at the ownership history printed down the body of the contract, the chain of names passing the house hand to hand across 40 years, and there, near the bottom, in the past, was the name Otis Greer. And at the very top, in the line marked grantee, in the line for the person who would hold the deed free and clear when the last payment cleared, was her own name, typed clean, Renee Calloway. 3 payments from now, 90-some days. She made a sound she had not planned to make and could not have stopped if she'd tried. Odessa picked up the single penciled sheet last of all and held it up where Renee could see it. 3 lines in her son's blocky, careful hand. The address, the payoff figure, $936, and underneath those, the only thing Theodore Calloway had let himself write down about any of it in 11 years. For R. Otis's porch. "He wasn't hiding money from you, baby," Odessa said, very quiet now, into the stillness of that room. "He was hiding it for you. For 11 years. In the very same drawer his own daddy was sitting at the day they came and took our house out from under us. He just learned the wrong lesson off the worst day of his whole life. That's the long and the short of it. They all did. Every last man in this whole sorry story learned the same wrong thing, and not one of them ever could bring himself to say a word. Renee stood there holding the pencil paper in two hands, and she did not say anything at all, because there was nothing left anywhere inside her right then that still knew how. Theo came home at 6:10, and the lights were on, all of them, and he knew before he was even through the front door that something in the house had changed. The way an old dog knows weather coming hours off. He came down the short hall, and he saw the whole of it in one frame, the way you see the scene of an accident. His mother in her good Sunday coat, sitting in the chair by the window, the roll-tops standing open, the locked bottom drawer pulled all the way out and empty, the payment book and the gray folder and the pencil sheet laid out flat and square on the desktop in the lamplight, and Renee standing in the dead center of the room with her dead father's house held in her two hands. He had spent 11 years building a wall, and it had taken his 78-year-old mother about 90 seconds and a key off a nail to bring the whole thing down. For a moment nobody moved and nobody breathed. Theo's eyes went from the open drawer to his wife's face, and his own face came apart. Slow, not in anger. There was not 1 ounce of anger anywhere in the man, but in the particular ruin of someone who has been caught doing a thing he is not ashamed of and has no earthly idea how to explain. "Mama," he said, "what did you do?" "What you should have done your own self 10 years ago," Odessa said, and there was not one drop of apology anywhere in it. Theo looked at Renee. Renee looked at Theo. And then she said the thing that needed saying, the thing that the house and the pencil and the 11 years of $300 could not undo or buy back, the thing that was hers and only hers to say. "You let me think you didn't trust me," she said. Her voice was not loud. It was the level voice, the one that scared her worse than screaming. "Theo, you let me live 11 years believing my own husband kept a locked drawer because there was something rotten in this marriage he was hiding from me. You let me fold bus money into a coffee can. You let me lie awake at 2 in the morning doing the light bill in my head. You let me." And here it caught, the first real crack right down the middle of the level voice. "You let me start to believe there was another woman, another family, because you wanted to hand me one perfect thing. You wanted the picture in your head. And you would rather I thought you were a stone-cold stranger for 11 years than risk me being let down for one single afternoon." Theo opened his mouth. Nothing came out of it. "I would have carried it with you," Renee said. "Don't you understand me, Theo? That's the part that's breaking me right now, standing here. I would have walked that bus money for 20 more years if I'd known 1 minute what it was for. You didn't just hide a house from me. You hid the chance to do it together. You took the best thing you have ever done in your life, and you did it alone, in the dark, in a locked drawer, where I couldn't get one finger to it to help you hold it up." And Theodore Calloway, 55 years old, a man who had not wept at his own father's funeral in 1989, who had driven a truck 2 million miles through other men's heartbreak without a wet eye, put his hand flat on the lip of the open drawer where the wall used to live, and he went down, slow, until he was kneeling at the desk, the exact same way his father had sat at it 46 years before, and he cried. Not the way it happens in a movie, big and clean and finished in a minute, the other way. The way it happens at a kitchen table at midnight, ugly and choked and ashamed, a sound dragged up out of a place that had been locked a great deal longer than any drawer. Daddy said keep one drawer, he got out. He said that's the wall that keeps the roof up. Theodore. Odessa rose up out of the chair, slow, and crossed the room to her son and laid her old hand on the back of his bent neck, the way she had laid it there when he was 9. "Your daddy kept his one drawer, and they took the house anyway. The drawer never once held a single thing up off the ground. All it ever did was mean your daddy sat in there all by himself the afternoon. The whole roof came down. That is the inheritance, baby. That is the thing you've been keeping so careful all these years. Not the roof, the sitting in there alone underneath it. They did not fix it that night. You do not fix 11 years in one night, And any story that tells you different is selling you something out the side of its mouth. Renee did not cross the room and fold into her husband's arms and let the deed and the porch make it all right by bedtime. That would have been easier to watch, and it would have been a lie. What she did instead was sit down at the kitchen table the next morning, the Saturday she was supposed to have left, with the payment book and the gray folder laid out between them, and say, "All right, show me. All of it, every number, from the very first one." And Theo showed her. He walked her through 11 years of $312 line by line down both pages. He explained the contract for deed and how it worked and where the teeth were, the modern teeth of the same trap that ate his father whole in 1963. He showed her the 3 payments left, $936, due across the next 90 days, and the date in June the deed would finally convey to her name. Renee listened the way her father had taught her, looking the whole time for the trap. And then she said the one thing that turned a gift back into a marriage. "We pay the last 3 together," she said. "I've got," and she almost laughed, a wet, broken little sound. "Theo, I've got an envelope I've been saving up to leave you. $317, 3 and 5 at a time for 14 months. And I am going to put it down on the last payment of the house you've been buying me behind my back. You understand what I am telling you? The money I saved up to walk out that door is going down on your last $312. So that when that deed comes back and it says Renee Calloway on it, it is not one more thing you handed me while I wasn't looking. It is a thing we did, both of us, with both our names in the same room at the same time. Renee, I don't want a house you built behind my back, Theo." She put her hand flat on the kitchen table over the open payment book, the exact same way she had put it flat on the locked drawer 2 days before, except that this time the wood under her hand gave her the truth instead of keeping it from her. "I want to be in the room. From this morning on, every drawer in this house opens. You hear me? Every single one of them. We do not have a wall in this marriage anymore. If the roof comes down again, it comes down on the both of us standing up next to each other, not on you sitting in the dark by yourself trying to be your daddy at that desk." Theo nodded. He could not get a word out, so he nodded. And then he did the hardest thing of all, harder by far than 11 years of silence, which was that he started that very Saturday morning to tell her the small things before he was sure of them. The transmission job that came in Monday that might not pay, the back tooth that had been aching for a month. The little daily fears a man like that had carried alone his whole life and never once set down in front of another person. He was bad at it. He got it wrong constantly. He would keep getting it wrong for years, the telling, because a man does not unlearn 40 years of his dead father's lesson over one weekend at a kitchen table. But he started. And it turns out that the starting is most of the whole thing. They made the last 3 payments together over that spring. The April $312 came out of Theo's check on the 28th, 4 days early as always. The May payment they split down the middle, $156 each, and Renee thought that was the most beautiful arithmetic she had ever done. And the final payment, in June, Renee carried herself. She walked into the front office of Sentinel Holdings, LLC, on a Tuesday at 11 in the morning, in her good coat, the coat as her mother-in-law's church coat near enough, and she laid down the last $312 in cash out of the unlabeled envelope, the leaving money, every bill of it, and she watched the young man behind the desk stamp the payment book, paid in full, in red. And she did not sing in that office, but something down in her was humming the old hymn anyway, the one about wading in the troubled water, the same one she had hummed low over a dying man on Fayetteville Street, because the water had been troubled her whole life and her father's whole life, and Walter Calloway's whole life, and here, for once at the end of it, was a single piece of dry standing ground with her own name on it. The deed to 1107 Kent Street conveyed on the 19th of June. Renee Calloway, owner, free and clear of all encumbrance. The house had not been kept up. Of course it had not. 11 years of renters and a company whose only job was to collect the $312 and pray you missed it. The porch her father had built, square and true in 1972, had gone soft in two of its boards, and the railing leaned out a good 3 inches, and the paint was a rumor of itself. But the house was standing. The bones Otis Greer, measured 4 times before he cut them once, were still dead level under all the neglect, because the man had built the thing on purpose to outlast every person who would ever try to take it off them, and outlast them it had. Theo could not give Renee her father back. But on a Saturday in the middle of July, he and 2 men from the garage and 3 deacons from Mount Zion came out to Kent Street with a truck bed of pressure-treated lumber and a circular saw and a level, and they tore out the 2 soft boards, and they rebuilt the porch. And Theo measured every cut 4 times before he made it once. Because Renee stood right there at his shoulder and told him quietly that that was how her daddy would have wanted it done. Miss Odessa sat in a folding lawn chair out in the yard in a wide church hat against the July sun and supervised the entire operation, and was wrong about exactly nothing. There was a red cooler of sweet tea, and one of the deacon's wives brought over a cast-iron skillet of cornbread and a foil pan of collard greens that had been going low and slow on somebody's stove since 8 that morning, and the smell of the greens and the smell of cut pine sat over that whole yard the way those smells used to sit over the whole neighborhood before the freeway, and for one long July afternoon, Kent Street sounded the way Renee remembered it, sounding when she was a girl of 9 on the top step of that porch. And Renee did a thing then that she had been turning over slow in her mind since the morning her mother-in-law knelt down at that desk and turned the key. She did not move the oak roll-top desk out to a shed. She did not get rid of it either, though one part of her wanted to, the part that would always be able to see Walter Calloway sitting at it the long afternoon the world ended, and her own husband sitting at it in the dark for 11 years keeping his wall. She had the desk carried over to Kent Street and set up in the front room by the window, where the morning light came in good and clean, and then she got a flathead screwdriver out of the kitchen drawer, and she took the brass lock off the bottom right drawer entirely, the lock and the little key and the 2 screws. All of it, and she left the drawer to slide free and open the way every drawer in a person's house ought to slide, and she dropped the lock and the key and the 2 screws into a glass jar on the shelf. Inside that drawer, the drawer that had held the secret in the dark for 11 years, she put 2 things: the payment book, stamped paid in full in red, and a photograph of her father, Otis Greer, taken in about 1974, sitting on the top step of the porch he built with his own hands, squinting into a summer sun that had set 40 years ago. The desk was not a wall anymore. It was the table where she and Theo sat down together on the 1st of every month and went through every single number, out loud. The 2 of them, both their names in the room, the drawer standing open the whole time. The thing about a trap is that the people who build it for a living do not stop building it just because one stubborn mechanic outwaited them for 11 years. There were other houses on other streets all over the old neighborhoods, yes, other families paying $400, $500 a month like owners, and owning nothing at all, one bad month and one circled date away from the curb with empty hands. Renee understood all of that now the way she understood the chain of names typed down her own deed. So when a young couple from Mount Zion, a nurse's aide named Tasha, who was maybe 26, and her husband who drove a delivery route for the same parts company that gave out the John Deere calendars, stood up proud and shining in the church basement that next winter and announced that they were buying a house. Finally, on contract, $475 a month, and weren't they just so blessed? Renee did not let it go on by her. She took Tasha aside afterward over by the big steel coffee urn, and she did not lecture the girl, because nobody in the history of the world had ever once been argued into anything good across a church coffee urn. She just told her own story instead. The balloon loan in 1958 that ate Walter Calloway's house in 5 years. The cousin's bad $38,000 paper in 1971 that ate her own father's house and then ate the man himself 3 years behind it. The contract for deed with its modern teeth, where you pay like an owner and own nothing until the very last dollar of the very last payment clears, where one missed month in year 9 can hand the whole thing, house and equity, and a decade of $475, right back to the company. She told Tasha to read every single line of it twice, to find out in writing exactly when and exactly how the deed conveyed. To never ever let a payment go one day past the first. To spend the $200 and get a lawyer to read the contract before she signed it, because the $200 lawyer was the cheapest house insurance she would ever buy in her life. "How you know all this?" Tasha asked her. "Because 3 men in my family learned it the hard way," Renee told her. "My husband's daddy, my own daddy, and my husband, who near about learned it a 4th time. And I am just purely tired of it being the hard way every single time, for every single one of us. Somebody in this neighborhood ought to be able to just tell you plain before you sign instead of after. So I'm telling you plain, read every line. Get the lawyer, don't ever be late." It became a thing she did. Not a foundation, not a program with a name and a logo and a banner in the fellowship hall. Just a woman who knew the exact shape of the trap, telling people who did not yet know it, in church basements and on front porches and over the back fence on a Saturday, the precise mechanism that had been quietly eating her people's houses for 3 generations straight. Land don't lie, her father used to tell her on the step. And he was right. But people lied, and banks lied, and companies with nothing but a P.O. box for an address lied. And the only thing that had ever once stood up against any of it was a person who already knew, willing to say the true thing out loud, in the room, before the pen touched the paper, where another person could still reach it in time. Her father had been right about one thing and wrong about one thing, and it took Renee 52 years to sort out which was which. He was right that a home is the one thing they can't ever garnish off your name once it is truly yours. He was wrong that land just sits there and waits for you. Land does not wait for anybody. You have to know the trap before you walk up on it. You have to not be standing there alone when you do. And you have to say the true and unfinished thing out loud to the person right next to you, even when the perfect finished thing is not ready yet. Even when you are afraid down to the ground that saying it might jinx the whole works. Theo learned that last part slowest of all of them, but he did learn it. On the 1st of every month for the rest of their life together, they sat down at Walter Calloway's old desk, with the brass lock sitting harmless in a jar on the shelf, and they pulled the drawer all the way open, and they said every number out loud to each other, and the roof stayed up over their heads. Not because there was a wall anywhere in the house. There was no wall left in it anywhere. The roof stayed up because there were 2 of them under it now, standing up in the morning light where they could always reach each other's hands. The drawer that had held a secret in the dark for 11 years held a paid-up book and a photograph of a man on his porch. And it did not lock anymore. That was the entire point of it. It did not lock anymore. Some walls really do hold the roof up, and some walls just leave you sitting all alone in the dark at a desk on the worst afternoon of your whole life. So did certain you are protecting. Everybody you that you never once notice is the person you love most has already packed a bag and set it by the door. The hardest thing in this world is not keeping the secret. Any frightened man alive can keep secrets. Lord knows the men in this family proved that 3 times over. The hardest is saying the true thing out loud before it is finished, before you are sure of it, while the other person can still walk into the room on her own 2 feet and pick up the other end of it and carry the weight alongside you. A gift held too long and too tight in the dark does not stay a gift. It curdles, it turns, slow, into a wound, and the wound comes out shaped exactly like the thing you were trying so hard to give. So here is the question worth sitting up with tonight, long after the house is quiet. Spiff someone you loved spent 11 years building you something in secret, terrified all the while that telling you might jinx a promise the world might never let them keep. Which would you truly rather have? The perfect surprise. handed to you whole at the end of all that silence. Or the whole unfinished truth told to you on the first day, so you could have carried every pound of it together, side by side in the light, even knowing, both of you, that it might in the end have come to nothing at all. I keep thinking about the part where he kneels at the desk. I wrote Theo as a good man. I still think he is one. But I'm not sure I forgive him, and I'm the one who made him up. He spent 11 years protecting his wife from a disappointment that hadn't even happened yet. I do that too. I save the good news. I wait until it feels safe to say out loud, and the people closest to me sit there thinking I've gone cold. The story wants you to feel relief when that drawer finally opens. What I felt was closer to grief. 11 years, traded for one clean moment. So I'll ask you the thing I'm still asking myself. Is a perfect surprise ever worth all the silence it costs to keep it?